Hey you, come, gather around the campfire, and welcome to the party. This is Party Chat, a JRPG podcast where we talk about everything that we love in the world of JRPGs and other Eastern titles. I am one of your hosts, Cameron Hawkins, and with me, as always, is my party partner, Kevin Kenson. Kevin, how are you doing this fine morning?
And that right there sums it up. It's a good morning. It is Tuesday. You know, it took a moment to remember what day of the week it is, but overall, doing pretty well. Excited to talk about some games.
Like, do I want to say what day it is? Because I didn't know, so I'm just going to say morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not going to be that day anymore by the time this goes live, because embargoes are a thing. But speaking of embargoes, got some fun early preview stuff we're talking about today. Capcom gave me the chance to play a whole bunch of... Basically, they have four now with Monster Hunter Stories 3, but I did not get to play that one. They got 4 big games coming out all next year that we know of, and I played 3 of them. Pragmata, Resident Evil Requiem, and the upcoming Onimusha Way of the Sword. I spent about 30 minutes on each one, give or take, maybe a little less, just because there was also like setup time and talking and that kind of thing. But was able to soak a good bit into each one. I think of the 3, we'll probably dive into Onimusha a little bit more, but definitely a healthy bit of stuff to talk about for the other 2 as well. Might as well just dive into it. Real quick, thanks again to Capcom for giving me the opportunity to play these. Just super awesome this early. This is actually meant to tie into Gamescom, which is why the embargo timing is when it is, because these, I believe, I don't know if they're floor demos, but they are demos that are going to be available at Gamescom. And so it's like, hey, do you just want a chance to be able to do these? So, let's start with Onimusha. Now, this might not mean as much to our listeners, but for your reference, just to kind of have some background on this, you and I did see it played at SGF, and what I got to play was the same section, but I'm fairly certain it is a different build. There are parts of the stage that were different than I remember them being from what we saw played. And so I don't know if that was a more up-to-date one. I don't know if what we played is like a more recent, like closer to final kind of idea. But it is a bit different from what you and I got to see previously. And obviously, I was actually the one playing it this time. I will say, as someone who really enjoyed the Onimusha games back on the PS2, particularly like the first 3, like that was really the main ones that I played a bunch. Very excited that this franchise is coming back. And I definitely have some questions after the slice I played, but for the most part, the vibes are good. Like, I'm looking forward to this. There are some things that I need to know, and some things I'm curious about to see what will be tweaked in like the final version, but I think the bones here are solid. So for those that don't know, Onimusha is an action title primarily, back on the PS2. It was kind of this like weirder era for Capcom where they were like experimenting with making an action game, but it had a lot of like Resident Evilisms still involved with like, oh, you have to like do a thing to unlock a door, or you have to like solve these puzzles, and it had a very like survival horror aesthetic kind of vibe, even though you're running around with like a katana just taking dudes out left and right. And the vibe in this one is somewhat similar to that. I think as time has gone on and Capcom now has a lot more action titles under their belt, obviously, this is bringing back a little bit of that aesthetic, but embracing the fact that, it has been quite a few years since the original ones. I think the one worry that I've seen some people talk about, and Capcom's even released official statements about this, I would not call this a Souls-like, like at all. Like, I think there's this very common assumption right now where it's like, oh, 3D action game that isn't lightning fast, it must be Souls-like. And it's like, no, that's not the vibe of this. There's not, at least when I played, there's not like bonfires. I'm not like collecting, like you do collect souls, but that's a thing from the games already that you would use for currency or like immediately recovering health and the like. I think one of the first things I'd like to highlight from the combat I did is the number of options the game gives you. You have kind of just a standard regular attack combo. for just like your, you just mash that to do regular attacks, and then you have your heavy attack for doing certain breaks and that kind of thing. What's more interesting though is that the options you have at a lot of your defensive capabilities. You have a block that, when timed right, can be a parry. You have like a little quick step. You have the Isin, which we'll talk about later. That's kind of like a series like standard thing. And then you even have like kind of combinations of that where you do block but then attack at the same time, which can do things like deflect arrows and send them back at enemies. So lots of tools for kind of choosing how you want to approach different enemy attack patterns and like how safe you want to play it versus how much you want to just like up the damage. Which is one of the things that was interesting, I think. One of the other people I was around playing commented on how like, oh, like the parry window seems really forgiving, which I agree with. Like when you time your block to do an enemy parry, like it seems like a pretty wide window. I think the reason for that is because one of the other defensive options, the Isin, which is like, again, kind of a big series standard thing, that has a significantly tighter window. So it's almost kind of like when we've talked about Expedition 33 in the past, how it's like, oh, the dodge is so much easier. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's meant to train you. But the real shit is doing, the parries. And so this game, I think the parry is pretty forgiving, but it's because the parry is not really like... It works, and it's defensive, and it's great to keep you alive. But if you really want to like tear through this game proper, the Isin's a lot more interesting. So what that is if you are paying attention to an enemy and you're not blocking or anything, you just, hands off the controller almost, and you hit the attack button at the right moment, right before an enemy hits you, you'll automatically do this little like quick step dodge and then strike them for basically an instant kill. I think there's some enemies where it'll just do a bunch of damage, but like most regular enemies, that just takes them right out. So that's like the real shit. Like if you want to like really have system mastery of this game, it's going to be, hey, like just be ready to do that. And because it's not like a block or a parry or anything like that, if you mess up your timing, you're just going to get punched in the face. There's definitely a healthy bit of recorded footage of me trying to practice the Isin timing, and I'm just taking enemy attacks to the face over and over again like an idiot. But it's definitely a cool feeling when you are able to pull it off. I think one aspect of the combat that will attract a little bit, not even like Souls-like, but specifically Sekiro, is enemies do have like a posture thing going on. It's not essential to break it. Like you can just kill enemies regularly otherwise. But if you successfully do like break posture from using a heavy enough attack or, successfully messing with, parrying enough and that kind of thing, you get to do a cool finisher that will give you, I think you get more souls out of doing it. I think there is a reward for like doing the finishing animation outside of just, damn, that looks cool.
Love to hear that.
Yeah. So I think they're kind of running this gamut here where like there are lots of tools that allow you to take your time and like, be patient and have an easier time with the game. Again, fairly forgiving parry window, lots of options for like how to tackle enemies. But if you want to like really just tear through this shit as fast as possible, having options like the Isin and like mastering all that kind of stuff adds a lot more interesting depth. A couple other combat things that came up, but I honestly didn't get enough time with, in my opinion, to like really get a great sense of. There's environmentals you can interact with sometimes. Like in the demo you and I saw, there was this whole thing where it was like lifting a tatami mat and throwing into enemies. That wasn't in mine. But what was there was a part where I was able to grab like a big old wheelbarrow full of stuff and just shove it at a group of enemies. And it just instantly took out all the ones that it hit. Just like as a quick one. So like that was a cool little thing, but also because it is heavily based on like they put that there for you to interact with. I'm not quite sure how often we're going to have options like that, when they're going to be like maybe a little bit more interesting, because like it was a nice feeling of like, oh, I just took those 4 guys out, but it's also like, hey, here's this thing you clearly want to interact with. Definitely early in the game, probably meant to be kind of a tutorial of like, hey, look at that, you should use that right now. I'm curious if they'll have more interesting varied uses for like environmental interactables in the future. And then one thing that does have me raising my eyebrow a little bit, and this is coming from like a series fandom type thing, is Oni armaments. So one of the big things in the older games is as you'd play through, you would unlock different styles of weapons. Like you'd equip an orb and it would change your weapon into like, oh, now you have like a big two-handed sword, or now you're dual wielding, or now it's a spear, like that kind of thing. In this demo, I just always had my regular katana. That was my main weapon. No other thing I could switch to. But I did have an ability called Oni Armaments, where it's basically like a super move. You fill up a meter. Once it's full up enough, you can then execute a special attack. And my sword transformed into these pair of light blades that I did like a combo with and did a ton of damage. Cool looking thing. I wonder if this is like in place of having those actual like different weapons at all times. Like if they want to focus on like, no, like you have your core moveset that is the katana, and these are just cool other special moves you can do that like harken back to that old thing in past games. Which I kind of hope isn't the case. Like, it's neat having an option like that, but I think the weapon variety was one of the things that was very appealing about the older ones. You know, it's like, oh, I really want to focus on using the dual blades, or I really want to focus on using the spear. Like, investing in a weapon type that you enjoyed. And I'm not sure that that's going to be the case this time, at least based off that snippet. You know, it's definitely an incomplete picture that hopefully we'll learn more about. And then as far as kind of like a last thing on combat goes, there was a boss fight I was able to play through. It was against another sword-wielding enemy, so it was a very like, you know, just intense duel kind of situation where all those different defensive tools come up. And this is one where I will admit the parry window being pretty forgiving is a little like, oh, that definitely makes this easier. Because like, you know, trying to use the Isen Strike on the boss, yeah, little annoying for me. Parrying, though, was able to do that fairly consistently, and it's like, okay, I'm making sure I'm not getting hurt. And maybe that'll be different for some bosses. Maybe there'll be attacks that can't be parried where you're not able to, like, abuse that as often. But at least for that fight, it was just, like, a very safe thing I could do pretty consistently. One thing that was cool about the boss fight, though, that they showed off is that similar to how you can posture break enemies, you can posture break a boss as well, and instead of that being like a huge tick of health, it can be, but instead you're able to pick what kind of cool move you want to do, where it's like, oh, I want to like go for the neck.
I remember that.
Or I want to, yeah. You can, you know, go for the neck or go to break the Oni Gauntlet. And so those do things where it's like, oh, because you know, went for their vitals, you did tons more damage. But if you went for the Gauntlet instead, you didn't do as much damage. You get a whole bunch of souls. Yeah. So that was a really like, that seems like a fairly simple example of it. And I'm very curious to see what like future bosses might give for options where it's like, maybe you disable them being able to use certain attacks, or maybe you're able to, you know, just like change the format of the fight a little bit. If it's just consistently like souls or damage, like that's still neat, you get a choice. But I'd be very interested in seeing if you get like some tactical options as well on top of that. Outside of combat, which was definitely the main focus of the demo, there's a little bit of exploratory type stuff. I mean, this definitely feels like it's going to be at least the section I played, very linear, minor puzzle solving type stuff, but it's like, hey, there's a blocked gate here. Go find where the tendrils lead to destroy the source, and then you can go through the gate. You know, along the way, also like fun little collectibles or not fun, but like, you know, resources and extra items to work with. That is one thing that I think will also maybe raise some questions about the Souls comparison, is just because you do have like your main recovery item that has a max limit, and you can find like pick up resources to refill it, but we see that in all kinds of other action games these days. Tsushima did something like that too. So yeah, overall, I think there's some solid bones here. I think similar to when you and I talked about it the first time, I will say I don't know if anything I played is necessarily like a groundbreaking, like, oh, I never like thought of this as a mechanic before, or here's something that's like a really new thing. It just feels like a very solid, like, hey, this is like, we looked back at the game we made, you know, 20 years ago, and here's how we're bringing it and updating it to modern day. Which there are some really cool updates and changes, but it does feel like it's kind of like catching up to the times, while having like, you know, a couple cool little things like the choosing how you want to damage the boss type thing. But it does also feel like a little safe, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing. It's just that might impact like what the initial hype level is for some folks, you know?
To put this into perspective a bit, did they say how far into the game this section that you played was? Like, was it early in the game? Was it like
it was early?
midway through?
It was definitely early.
Okay.
Yeah, because like I was
makes
still
me feel,
getting
like better
yeah
about what you're saying, right? Because
yeah.
there's so much more time for everything to evolve.
Absolutely. Like everything I played was definitely like, oh, this is your first real stage kind of energy, and like we're going to show you how certain things work. And again, like that example of the environment interactable, like that was definitely just a like, hey, did you know that you can like interact with some things to do a cool thing, and like you should go do that right now. I could see there being like another playable bit before this section, but that's like almost like the opening story kind of bit, right? It's like, oh, you don't have the gauntlet yet, and we're just introducing you to the characters. This is like, oh, you just got the gauntlet, you just started getting like your cool, soul powers and stuff. We're going to walk you through how that all works right now. Definitely an early slice. So I think there's a lot of room, as you said, for like, these are kind of the building blocks that are introduced in this area. I think there's going to be there's a lot of potential for more complex versions of all this stuff that could be really cool. I just don't know yet because I've only played this opening slice, but I think it shows like a good proof of concept with it.
It sounds like, and maybe this isn't the way I should look at games, but it is like, it sounds like a game that has really good fundamentals. That it looks like, it looks like it has really fun fundamentals, and it's just like, hey, are you going to build upon this, or is this basically going to be the experience the entire time? And then it's like ultimately going to be like, hey, this is like a solid 8 out of 10 game, but it doesn't do anything particularly interesting or new to make it like stand out in a significant way. And that's kind of like what I was getting when we saw it behind closed doors at SGF, right? We talked about that. I was just like, I just kind of am waiting for a thing to get me excited about it in a more tangible way. And so like, based off of what you're saying, like, doesn't sound like that is there yet, or we've seen that yet still, but I'm still excited and looking forward to playing the game for sure, like compared to outside of Monster Hunter Stories 3, just because we're the JRPG podcast and like we love JRPGs. Like, that is definitely the Capcom game I'm most like, I would say more so like intrigued by, because I think that having played Pragmata, and you're going to talk more about that soon, like I was like, I'm in. Like I that was a really great simple demo that showed what they're doing, why it's different, and I'm excited to see everything through. So is that everything that you had about Onimusha, or can I start asking some questions?
Yeah, no, you're good. I will add just real quick to the last thing you said. I do think a difference here is that like Pragmata is a new IP where like the goal is introducing something kind of new with it. I definitely think part of the goal with this Onimusha is like, even though it's not the largest fandom because it's like who played it back in the day, I think there is a very intentional like, hey, this is built for like the Onimusha fans, and we're hoping to attract new people and to also like get folks to like enjoy the series, but we're not going to like reinvent the wheel here. We're trying to upgrade what was here before.
You're trying to modernize it. That's it. Yes. You're not trying to like do this kind of, you're not trying to like God of War reboot Onimusha.
Exactly.
I get what you're saying. So the main thing that I'm curious about is the sword play. There's a lot of comparisons to Sekiro. Does it feel like Sekiro, or is it a bit slower? Because you did mention that it is like a slower sword action game. Does the parry feel good when you do it? Does the sword feel good when you hit somebody? Like, those are the kind of things that I really am looking for in this game, like from just a minute-to-minute gameplay perspective, that now that you've played the game, I'm very curious as to like how that all feels.
Yeah. I would start by saying it does not feel like Sekiro at all. Like, this is a very different, like, yes, they are both third-person action games that involve, samurai, katanas, whatever. These are not really the same type of action game. I would say that Onimusha, similar to what we were talking about earlier with modernizing the older one, it is going for a slightly older style. And there's a different emphasis on what feels good, right? Like, going back to the parry. The parry has a pretty forgiving window, and the parry also has, it's not like a quick animation where, like, oh, you parried and just did a quick, like, oh, you did the timing right, ton of posture damage, quick flash. The parry is like a full-blown animation. It's like, oh, you successfully parried, you're gonna, slide their weapon over to the side, leaving them open to further up attacks, and, like, it's a whole thing animation-wise. So
that's pretty cool, though. That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. So, but I guess what I'm emphasizing here is that this is not there is a parry in this game. This is not a parry action game. If you are looking for, I want parries the video game, that is not what this is. Parries are an option, but that is not what this action combat is built around. It is definitely more so, like, the parry is a defensive option to keep yourself alive, but it is not the be-all, end-all focus of the game. Like, it is, again, there are lots of defensive options for avoiding enemy attacks or for trying to counter-strike with stuff like the Isin. And if anything, if there is a trademark, it's that, right? And this goes back, too, to, like, there's an example I've talked about sometimes with action games, where I feel like action games sometimes have two different goals in mind. There's the action game where you're given a lot of tools and you play the way you want, and there are better, more efficient ways, but you can get through the game, like, the way you want to. And then there's action
DMC,
games...
like Devil May Cry.
Yeah. And then there's action games where, like, there are rules you need to follow, right? Like, you have to play this game the right way, or you're not going to get through it, You need to learn to parry in Sekiro. You need to learn how to do the right combos and moves and answers in Sifu. That is not what... Onimusha is not in that category. Onimusha is definitely in that more give you tools, give you ways to play, and there is that masterful level. Again, like, if you want to focus on the Eastern Strike and really, like, figure out how to be untouchable and just be taking enemies out by doing that last-second strike all the time, cool, that's there. If you just want to run around and spam the attack button and do your best to not get hit in the process, it's not going to necessarily look elegant, but at least on the base difficulty, that can be enough to get through it. So, definitely a different focus, I would say, in terms of, like, what type of action experience they're aiming for.
Now, I have two questions that are very different from each other.
Shoot.
So, the first one being, when you die, is that aspect of death similar to, like, a Souls-like, where those souls will go away and then you can get them back? Or are they just, like, or do you lose that, like, lose a certain amount and you can't get them back? Or do you get to keep them no matter what? Like,
Sure.
What's the situation there?
Yeah. So you should ask someone who died. Because I didn't.
Okay, you didn't die. You didn't die.
I will say, based on series knowledge and the direction they're going with this, souls aren't really currency in the exact same way as, like, you would view in a Souls-like. Like, they are, but it's for the game's just, like, unlocking moves and that kind of thing system.
Yeah, of course.
And I assume that it's either a reload situation or it's, like, a checkpoint resume and you haven't lost anything. Like, I don't think there's going to be a loss and recover aspect to this game. I could be wrong.
Interesting.
But based on just what I've seen and their design goals, that it doesn't make sense to me to add, like, that kind of punishment
they don't
system.
really do it in Devil May Cry with those orbs either. So, like, I can understand that. I just feel like because you, like, suck them up, I just feel like that, like, oh, like, you're absorbing these souls. If you die, then, like, they fall out. Like, you're kind of, like, fitting the same rules as enemies. Does that make sense? Like,
Sure.
Like, the main character is following the same logic as everyone else in that world.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it, too, is that that's just an established framework that is very popular right now.
Okay.
Whereas, like, again, Onimusha's older, right? Like this is
No,
modernizing
yeah,
a game that I'm just
for
saying that
sure.
like the rules that they had back then for stuff like how currency and gaining souls, like especially because it's souls, right? Like if I was like, oh, when you defeat enemies, they drop this item that you use to level up, like then you would not make that assumption the same way. But because it's souls, it's like it's so easy to like
That's fair.
have that correlation right now because it's such a common thing. And like again, we're kind of in like it's kind of hard to breathe right now in the Souls-like space because there are so many games.
That's fair.
And
That's fair.
I guess that's also like a further emphasis on how like, look, I can see where you can draw some parallels, and there's going to be some people that I think want to like make the argument. This is not a Souls-like. Like really, like there absolutely are going to be some influences just because they occupy the same space as being action games, but this is not a Souls-like.
No, for sure. I never really thought that. Like I thought that there would be like elements to it, but like I wouldn't ever think that I would, genreify it as a Souls-like.
Right.
My other question is, because I don't remember what it was when we saw the gameplay. What are the visual cues like for when you want to parry or you want to do like the Ishin or the Isin or whatever it's called? Like what are those different cues or are they the same cue and it's just like you just decide which way you want to react to that?
The cue is you're about to get hit in the face. Like
So
there's not
no visual cues
you're not getting a glint
outside of a sword, like a weapon coming towards you.
Yeah, your cue is like hitbox detection, I guess. Like paying attention to when you're about to be struck and timing it just right. Where again, the parry window, very forgiving. Like I was definitely a little early on a few of those, and it went off without a hitch. And you do still have a regular block that, outside of draining your posture, does work. But for like the Isin, timing that, you're not getting like a super telegraphed, this is the time. It is definitely a more traditional like trial and error. You can learn the Isin timing if you want, but you're going to have to like learn it. We're not going to just give you the like, that sound effect is the timing, do it then.
Okay. That's interesting. I'm not saying that like it needs to exist per se, but and I think that there's an argument that we've just gotten really comfortable with those type of things in games. But I guess it's just like something that I'm gonna have to experience for myself to know like, oh no, this is something that should be a thing. Because
well, I think it also goes
Yeah.
back to it goes back to the concept of necessity a little bit, I think, where like I can understand the reliance on cues in a game where like you have to do this, right? Like going back to like the Sekiro example where like you have to posture break enemies, or Expedition 33 where it's like if you want to get the parries down, you need to learn parrying, and that's a game that didn't really have cues, and I know that was one of your critiques with it where you weren't a big fan of not having as clear of one. In this game, like the Isin is a great way to show off your mastery and like do things efficiently, but again, you can just mash the regular attack button and rely more on positioning, and like you could effectively, at least based on the snippet I played, you could play through this without parrying. Like you could just never try to rely on that.
But like that doesn't, yeah, I understand the flexibility of it, but that doesn't like justify not having like certain things, like in my opinion.
I guess in my mind it's just that it's something you really do need to learn and figure out for yourself, because it is meant to be a system mastery thing and not a core like, oh man, you're going to be doing this every 20 times a minute. Here's the thing you have to make sure you master and do, otherwise you're not going to get through the game. As opposed to like, hey, this is a really cool, awesome way of like taking an enemy down quick, but you're going to need to learn how to do it.
Yeah, I guess yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, I just think it's just something I'm going to need to play and like experience for myself to be like, oh, this should feel this way or this should feel that way. Kind of like what we were talking about with like, we've talked about in the past with like Expedition 33 is that like, I don't think that those cues are very good and I don't think like, especially specifically for parrying. And again, on the other side of things, I also think that we have kind of been not spoon-fed. Spoon-fed's not the word I'm looking for, but for lack of a better term, spoon-fed to like to expect these things in these type of games. But I also think that there's like an accessibility aspect to it. I think it's a very nuanced thing where it's like, hey, like I understand that this game wants you to like master these systems and also just like have the flexibility to play the game that you want. But I also don't think that like not having those cues changes those goals, like fundamentally changes the way that the player's going to approach the game, I guess, if that makes sense. But again, at the end of the day, like I'm not trying to like make this a super elongated topic. But we just have to wait and see, and I have to just play the game for myself to be able to be like, okay, like I can understand this. Like there's just some things, like even with a visual aspect to it, having seen the game, I'm just like, I kind of just have to play the game and see like, okay, this makes sense, or okay, this doesn't make sense, or again, or just I feel like that this could be in the game and it doesn't affect the overall like design and experience that I think that the developers are trying to portray to the player.
Yeah.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about regarding Onimusha?
No, I think that about covers it. Again, I think the main takeaway is, this was a very early slice where it definitely was a focus on fundamentals, and I think there's a lot of space that needs filling, right? Where it's just like, kind of like you were saying earlier, like there's kind of two different ways this could go. It's like, oh, this is the game. Like this is the whole game, in which case, fine, it would be good. I would be like, oh, like I'm enjoying this. But I think there definitely needs to be some interesting like play on these building blocks to make it, I think, like a real special title. And the potential's there. We just have to see what the rest of it looks like.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I'm super excited for it. This is a day one game for me. Like I don't see that changing. Yeah. I know that I've sounded like more down than up on it, but it's more so that I'm just like, it's just curiosity more than anything.
Yeah, and some of it is also definitely just also like mentality or what you're looking for out of the title, because like I know this is a thing we've differed on this, right? Like the whole like parry signal thing. I'm like, I kind of don't like those, and you're like, oh, like if they don't have that, what are they doing? And it's like there's just two very different thought processes of like what contributes to the game. Which is, why it's fun for us to talk about these things.
Yeah, and I think cues, like, depend on presentation. It's not just like a straight up like, oh, parries always need a cue. Like, I'm not like that, but it depends on how the camera looks and how there's so many like aspects to that. Like in Kingdom Hearts, there's not really a parry, but like I don't need a cue to know block or reflect magic, or like, you know what I mean? Right. Like it really just depends on
it's the overall visual information, because like it also depends on what you define as a cue, right? It's how reliable is the hitbox detection and like your reasoning of I'm about to be hit versus like some games doing the very obvious cues where it's like, hey, there's a glint or a sound effect or a something that's telling you now is the window. It'd be interesting to see in the full picture.
Yes, definitely. You also got to go hands-on with Resident Evil Requiem.
Yes.
Talk to me about it.
So, Resident Evil Requiem, definitely more in the style of the other kind of later number mainline games, at least the segment I played. This definitely was like an early slice. The demo that you and I saw at SGF, the hands-off one, that's essentially what I played. Without the blackouts transitioning between scenes. Like, I actually just got to uninterrupted play that whole opening segment.
Oh, okay, interesting. Because that seems, at least on, like, from what I saw at SGF, a significant chunk of game.
I mean, some of it comes down to how you pace yourself. You know, like if you, because I mean, with the gameplay we saw, there's always a bit of an emphasis of trying to build up the sense of a horror movie aesthetic, right? Like the character moves a little slower, or maybe they stop and stare at a dark hallway for a while before moving forward.
Yeah,
and
I guess I'm sorry. I guess I'm more so talking about like the trailer or like the gameplay starts with like you in the FBI office.
Gotcha. I didn't do any. There was no plot like that. It started
so
right.
it just starts with you like basically restrained.
Yeah. So it's this early part.
That makes way more sense. Way more sense.
Yeah,
okay, keep going.
So this is going to be, I think, one of the interesting things about Requiem and seeing, because similar to what we were talking with Onimusha, where it's like, you know, we're seeing the building blocks and needing to see where it goes from here. With Requiem, this opening segment definitely leans into the helpless horror aspect that Resident Evil will occasionally tap into, right? Like there's always a segment where you feel this way. It's maybe the very beginning, maybe it's the frickin' dollhouse in Village, but like there are segments where you're helpless, and then there's segments where you have guns and you're taking out monsters left and right because you know how this works now. And we haven't really seen that action aspect of Requiem yet. The segment I played was definitely like, you are just hiding and trying to get through the area, you know, leaning into that horror aspect a lot more. Which I will say, one of the fun things this demo did and highlighted right away is that for segments like this, light plays a very essential role. Both in terms of like how it affects enemy mechanics, but also just, I think, instilling that sense of dread in players, because it's dark. Like you will enter areas where it's just pitch black and your method of light is a little Zippo lighter. And it's like, yeah, that's lighting up your immediate, but like it definitely has fall off and you're not seeing the wider distance just yet. And they really lean into that for this segment of the game. Which also plays a lot with the whole first person versus third person thing that I don't want to dive into just quite yet, but I will say that is one of the hallmarks of one of the big sales pitches right now for Requiem is that both options are available from the start, and I did make it a point to play the game both styles a little bit. But that said, I will say first person definitely seems to be the intent here. Like they want this to be like 7 and like Village. It's just that because people, you know, like third person and demand it, they made that an option. But like the experience I got to play, at least, again, because this is the more kind of horror immersive type part of it, first person definitely felt like the way to go in this section. So yeah, a large part of my demo, there was really only one enemy, but it was a big one. You know, think of things like Mr. X in Resident Evil Remake 2, or, you know, running into certain enemies in the Village. You just have, it's this enemy where it's like, you just have no way of fighting back right now. You have no weapons. Even if you did, it would probably take a lot to take it down. You just need to run and hide and hopefully run away and take advantage of how the hallways kind of interconnect in certain ways to where hopefully you can like fake it out to make it go somewhere so you can get past it. A big part of dealing with that enemy was, again, playing with light, and the idea was that the enemy was sensitive to light and didn't like it, so you would do things like, oh, if I can like kind of get it in this hallway, I'm going to flip this light switch so the lights go on and make it like not happy and want to go to one of the dark areas, and that can be like how I try to get out quickly or get by it. And they also play with the sense of dread of that enemy being around by teasing you a little bit with like getting the items you need to proceed. The part that was a little like, damn it, was I needed a screwdriver to open up a fuse box to get a fuse I needed. And the screwdriver was in a room where there were a whole bunch of items I could pick up, and all the areas I was checking, couldn't find it. And it ended up being on top of like a cabinet in a toolbox that I couldn't climb up to unless I took the time to like get this push cart and push it up to it. But not like in the Last of Us very simple style, like, yeah, grab the thing, move around, get it to where you need to go, you're good to go.
No, it's not slow. Really. It's a slow thing.
It's a slow thing, and it's a noisy thing, and noise attracts the enemy. So you're doing this thing where you're just like, okay, I know what I need to do now. but I'm hoping the enemy's far away enough to where it's not going to detect me and just run up and start wrecking my shit. So I have time to get to the toolbox. And so it's this very like lightly stressful thing where you're just like, come on, just be done. Why am I not done yet? Why am I not up to the thing yet? Okay, now I got to take the time to climb on top of it, get to the toolbox. Let's go, let's move. Definitely intentionally giving you this vibe of just like things are taking time and you do not want them to.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I have one funny question, but also serious question, because we talked about this when we saw the gameplay at SGF. Have they settled down on her breathing, or is that still just like super apparent all the time?
Yes and no. And I'm not sure if it's because I was actually playing and focused on objectives that I was just like subconsciously shutting it out of my brain. But there are definitely times where the breathing would be heavier, where it's like, okay, you first go into the dark hallway, breathes a little heavier because this stuff is scary. Oh, I just got hit by the enemy and I'm running away from it. Breathing a little heavier because, like you just had this confrontation. But I think during the more subdued moments where it's like, okay, the enemy's been gone for a while and I'm not currently trying to push a cart or something, where it did seem like the breathing was less, I think it felt more present during the demo we watched because it was such a cut up demo that was focused on like things actively happening. And so because it was like that highlight reel, you're always getting the heavy breathe sections. Whereas in actual gameplay, definitely present, but it didn't bother me as much as it did in what we saw played. And again, that might come down to the fact that just because I'm playing it, and so I'm a little more focused on, things I'm doing and not just necessarily sensory information. But it did not bother me as much as when we saw it played.
Okay. And then is there like anything in regards to the story that you really gained from this, or that you were informed by Capcom this time around? Because I'm just curious about that, because there's a lot of theories, right? And we're recording this the day of the opening night live thing, so surely we're gonna get new information on Resident Evil Requiem, and we might get more information there, but we said back in June that this just seems to be like more Resident Evil based off of this kind of newer era, where we're getting we're getting new characters, and the more legacy characters are filling more of a support role narratively, and so I'm curious as to like, hey, like, are we gonna get Leon Kennedy as the support character this time around? Are we gonna get Claire? Are we gonna get Jill? Like, there's so many potential options, and because we know so little about the story and like why this character. Her name's Ashley, correct? Or what's her name? Do you remember?
I don't off the top of my head, but Ashley's not right because Ashley is Resident Evil 4.
Ashley's Resident Evil 4. Okay. Grace? Is it Grace?
It's Grace. Yeah, it's Grace Ashcroft.
It's
because Alyssa Ashcroft was the character from, I forget its name right now, but the other Resident Evil game that they're kind of calling back to with this one. But yeah, Grace.
Yes. So we know that she works for the FBI. She's probably sent on some sort of mission. And I'm not, again, I know like probably more than I should know about Resident Evil, having played very few of them.
Right.
But I'm also just like, where are we at with the story now in Resident Evil? In a real way, like that's really pushing the overarching world and story forward.
Sure.
And I'm just kind of like curious as to like what, at the very least, this may not have to do with the demo itself, but like what are you kind of hoping / looking for? Like, do you really care about where the story's going, or because again, there's just been this shift since Resident Evil 7.
Yeah. So, okay. This is a bit of a loaded question because there's a lot that we could go into with this. I will say, as far as how this pertains to the demo I played, didn't really learn anything new. Like, in fact, if I had played this demo without the stuff we had already seen, I would know very little, other than I am a character inside of a place where there's a monster trying to kill me, and there's kind of some weird mysteries, you know? As far as what I'm hoping for out of this, or kind of the general direction, Resident Evil is a game where I think they have to constantly walk a balance between keeping alive the suspenseful horror roots while being able to also have those action segments, but not have it be too over the top. Because that's kind of the sliding scale that happened over the first half of the franchise that we saw, where they kept making games and it was like, hey, like, all of these main characters, they've been through shit over and over and over again. They're all getting more experienced. It gets translated into the gameplay a little bit, right? Like, Leon is way more capable in 4 than he is in 2. And then you get to 6, where, like, everyone's just an action star hero blowing stuff up left and right. And like, there's no horror whatsoever at this point. Everyone's just like down to business from the get-go. And so that was part of the move with Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, and then with Village, Village upped the action a little bit again, but it's like, hey, Ethan's a new person. 7 especially is really leaning into how, like, kind of helpless he is and just trying to, like, get by and survive. And eventually he hits that, like, more action-y feel, but it takes a minute. And I think that's honestly, like, the sweet spot for the series, and I think it's hard for them to maintain that when leaning on repeatable main characters. Because this is a problem I think that happens in a lot of horror games that rely on the same protagonist. It's like, how do you make that person helpless again? Right? Like, this happened with Dead Space. Like, Isaac's just a pro by 3. Like, he's the person telling other people what to do in a crisis situation and how to kill the monsters. And, like, again, it translates into, like, this main character has done this before. How do you make them feel helpless? So I think that's part of the goal with Requiem, by introducing Grace, by giving us a little less information to go off of, because they kind of have to hit that light reset button every now and then to keep that horror aspect going. I feel like we're going to get a cameo of someone. I know a lot of people are like betting on Leon. I don't think they're going to like drop entirely recognizable faces. But I do think it's unlikely that we'll have, like, the focus on that cast again, unless it's things like DLC chapters or specific segments of the game. Some way of being like, all right, now you get to have a chance as, like, this legendary zombie killer character. But now we have to go back to you being scared in dark hallways.
That's fair. And honestly, like, that does put things into perspective that I never really thought about like how these characters, they get the experience, and then they're just like, how do these characters stay, like, scared, or like how do they, like, how do you portray that in the gameplay? That's very good stuff right there. But that does also kind of put into perspective a bit for me. It's just like, Grace is a FBI agent, and I just, like, feel like that she would be, like, obviously, like, and like almost anyone, like, that isn't these legacy characters sees a creature like that, they're gonna freak the fuck out. Like, don't get me wrong there. But I also think that, like, I hope that, like, they do kind of meet this sweet spot of, like, yeah, she's never really experienced something to this degree before, but she's also aware of, like, the anomalies that have happened throughout the world, or like throughout the United States or whatever, over the past how many years Resident Evil has taken place. And the FBI has also, like, kind of trained their agents to prepare for those type of situations, or to, like, be kind of at least keep those things into perspective, where I just, like, hope that we see some of that at some point, like, later on in the game.
Yeah, no, because it's definitely a thing where it's, like, similar to how the characters we're used to have gotten experience. It's like, hey, enough 6 is really the problem here, like timeline wise, right? Because almost every game you could argue, oh, it got covered up, no one really knows anything about it, maybe just upper echelons of government. But like 6 is like, that was a worldwide, like, stuff went down. And everyone kind of now knows that zombies are a thing that can happen, or at least weird bioweapons and such, right? Is the term that gets thrown around, like, for describing the monsters that run in the series. So yeah, like, it would stand to reason that it's like, hey, that's probably in a training manual somewhere. Like, hey, in case of weird bioweapon attack, here are things that you should know, or here's ways to handle, Las Plagas or whatever. Yeah, I don't know how much that'll play a role into it. That is kind of a genie in the bottle. I think sometimes they just pretend never got opened. Like, no, like, just, yeah, she doesn't know about it. It was all covered up. People don't know that monsters like this can exist. Yeah, it'll be. It's an interesting thing to see how they handle that tonally. I certainly have questions for how the greater story of this is going to shape out, because I agree with you. Like, we get this kind of base pitch with Grace, but leaves so many things open-ended, as it should. I don't want them to spoil the whole plot until I actually play it, but it does have me scratching my head of where it's going to go.
And just from the outside looking in, as someone who has not played but like knows a lot about Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil Village, like, I just feel like the story hasn't been pushed in a major way in a long time. And I just like, and I could be wrong about that, but like, I'm just like, that is the thing that I think is the most fascinating about Resident Evil. Because Resident Evil, again, it's the series that I want to love. Like, I want to love it, like, on paper, outside of, like, it being, like, because, like, the horrors, like, I don't think those games, outside of probably 7 actually does seem really scary. I don't think those games are really that scary for me as someone who does not like horror.
Right.
And, again, I played Resident Evil 2 Remake, and I played, like, a decent chunk of Leon's story, and I was just like, okay, I'm kind of good on this. Like, I'm not really getting anything out of this. And then I played Resident Evil 4 Remake when that came out a few years ago. And I was like, I want this to be the game because how much people revere Resident Evil 4.
I mean, consistently the one that people talk about being, like, number one. Like, yeah.
Yeah, and I was playing it. I got to the castle. Like, I did all the village stuff, and I heard like the stuff leading up to the castle is like the best part of it all. And I got to the castle, and I'm just like, all right, I guess this is. It didn't really just do much a whole lot for me. So I'm just like, okay, I guess I'm kind of done with this because it's not really. Again, it's just not really grabbing me in a way that people made me think it would. And so yeah, I just like, I don't see myself unfortunately playing Resident Evil Requiem, but it is always that series that like I want to keep my eyes on as it continues, because I do like a lot of the stuff that I see, but when I play it I'm like, oh, this is all right. I'm not crazy about it.
Yeah, I mean, this just ultimately sounds like mismatched what makes your brain happy while playing games, and it's just the franchise is not quite for you as it is for some other folks. Not to say you can't enjoy aspects of it, but it's just not landing for you in the same way. In terms of like the ask of how it might progress the overarching story, I'm not going to say that like Resident Evil storytelling doesn't matter, but I would say it's generally not the strongest emphasis. Like, it's cool to see familiar faces. It's cool to learn about like the answers of certain mysteries, or see where we're going from one game to the next in terms of like how they might link, especially when they are very obviously setting up for a future one. Like 7 and 8 definitely had a little bit of like, oh, this is going somewhere again. But I would not say that like my investment in Resident Evil is not like, oh man, I can't wait to see like what's next in Leon's life. Like, no, it's like, oh, cool, Leon, awesome action hero that I get to see again real quick. And like, I love that character. Anyways, what's the next part I need to solve of like this problem coming up? I would say Resident Evil, a lot of it is much more motivated by like the gameplay experience and the resource management, at least for me, than like oh man, I wonder what the next step of the story is. Because honestly, I feel like a lot of Resident Evil's overarching story is they're figuring it out as they go along. Like, I don't think there's been some long-term plan where like, oh man, I can't wait to reveal like this next missing piece of the puzzle. It's like, man, they write each game in and of itself, and maybe it's gets some interesting tiebacks to others, but this isn't some kind of grand narrative situation.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from, and again, that does help put things into perspective, because I think that just from growing up through the kind of, the rise of Resident Evil, these characters have been so prominent in the story, and now like it's been 2 games, and we've only seen one of those characters come back in a real way, and it's and that it's been like almost a decade since Resident Evil 6, or even longer. It's just like, dang, like I want to see these characters return and still like have a place here, even if they're not like the main focus.
Yeah.
And I'm not I don't even really play the games in a real way, but I just know how prolific these characters are.
Sure.
That like it just feels wrong from an outsider looking in.
No,
but I get it.
No, 100%. And that's why I think like cameo, absolutely. Like I think there's room for things like, give me a small segment where like, whatever, Jill shows up and I play as her for 20 minutes and get to feel like a badass before going back to being Grace, like I am all for like having those cameos and those appearances, because I do think that's important in the sense of like people love these characters. Even if it's not necessarily a narrative where I'm like wondering what the ending is going to be for someone. And so, yeah, and I will say too, something that feels a little bit annoying is the fact that like, I'm not saying he doesn't have fans, but I would say if we're doing like tier lists of popular Resident Evil characters, Chris is like maybe 3rd at the highest. It's like Leon and Jill are so high up here. And then it's like, all right, we're going to get a cameo character in 7. Yeah. It's Chris. Oh, we're going to get like Village. Maybe we'll get another. It's Chris again. Okay. Cool. No doubt. So like, I definitely think people are hoping, like again, Leon is the one I think I've seen the most demand for. Personally, as much as I like Leon, I think Jill would also be a fantastic like character to have come back again. And there's plenty of other people they could also do callbacks to. But yeah, Chris being the only one to come back post 6 so far is kind of like, all right, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah, and who knows how those conversations go, right? Where like Capcom's like, oh, we want to bring this legacy character back, and they're like, no, you can't do this because we have this planned, and it's not going to work if you do this. Like, that could totally be a thing. So, but I'm excited to hear your thoughts about Resident Evil Requiem once you play it, and we find out like who if there is a guest. I mean, we'll know if there's a guest character before then, but
yeah,
I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it regardless. So, lastly, you got to play Pragmata. It was the same demo that we got to play at SGF, but this time you actually got to fight the boss.
Yes, I did.
I want to hear all about it.
Yes, God damn it. That was the most frustrating. So for anyone that didn't hear our SGF episode, I'll go over some of the things about Pragmata again real quick. But one thing I want to emphasize is that when we did this demo back at SGF, it was the same demo, but literally we get to a moment where a big giant robot comes out and it's like, oh man, it's boss fight time. That's what's up. And then sometimes when you're not supposed to go past a certain part, the demo just ends, it fades to black. It says, thank you for playing or whatever. This wasn't that situation. This demo was still playable, but then you had a person over your shoulder go like, hey man, you got to stop right now. Like you can't play this segment yet. And I was like, why? There's a giant robot here. I want to fight it. And so being able to do that this time around was so refreshing. So yeah, just real quick rundown of how Pragmata plays for anyone that didn't listen to our other episode. Third-person shooter, The real big kind of interesting gimmick of the game is that you can hack enemies, but you're doing it in real time, and it's like its own little mini game where you're locking onto them and then using buttons to, navigate this little map where you can activate different debuffs or break down their defenses, and then you proceed to take them out. And it's something where like it might sound a little overwhelming, but the way they've put it into the game actually feels really nice. And the other aspect of that is needing to juggle what weapons you have on hand. Because all the weapons, aside from your basic pistol, have limited uses. And so it's like, oh, cool, you picked up this like shockwave gun that it's effectively a shotgun. And that's really great against certain enemies, but you might not want to just like spam it nonstop. Maybe use it for the right type of enemy that like really it's going to benefit against. So just really neat, I think, balance of like tactical decisions, paying attention to positioning, and needing to figure out the right way to like use all the tools at your disposal to just take out enemies safely. So all that was cool. The boss fight. The boss fight basically played out like this in a grander way. You're still doing a lot of the same things where it's like you're repeatedly going to try and hack them to expose weaknesses. They also have just like regular weak points that, you'll be able to hit without hacking, but it's kind of tough to do. Like you really got to get your timing down just right. And it's more like okay, I'm waiting for my hacks to refresh or, what I'm trying to do. So I'm just going to like try to hit these like tanks on the back of the enemy. One new mechanic is introduced in this boss fight that is basically like a super move. I didn't quite catch what the requirement for it is. I don't know if it's just like building up a meter over time or amassing a certain currency. But you basically do this big shockwave around you that's like an auto hack. You're not doing the minigame. You're not like having to figure anything out. You just do this big shockwave and everything caught in it gets exposed and works as a hack. So it's a great way of either like opening up a whole bunch of enemies all at once, or in the case of a big enemy, just having the opportunity to like interrupt certain attacks and just have that instantly happen when instead of trying to navigate like, oh, I got to do the minigame while like not getting hit by these attacks, which is neat. Very satisfying boss fight. I really dug that there's some nice cinematic moments to it because you do get some nice little like finisher animations and kind of like a midpoint one where it's like, okay, you've done enough damage and you like ripped out a certain part. So like now it's kind of time for a second phase where things change up a little bit. Honestly, like I love the older Onimusha games and I enjoyed my time with the Onimusha demo. I really like the Resident Evil games and I'm very excited for Requiem. I actually think in terms of just raw fun, Pragmata was the winner for me out of these three. And part of that is probably due to the fact that this was a little later into the game feeling, and the other two were very like kind of early on tutorial-ish sections, and they're both, sequels and series that I'm already familiar with and have some connection to already and have some expectations going in. Whereas this is a brand new IP, and it's got some really fun, interesting ideas that I think mix up the formula a little bit, where it's like, yeah, I've played a third-person shooter from Capcom, but the way the hacks interact with it and just the general setting vibe, very into. Much more than I initially thought. Like, when we first saw trailers for this game, I was like, yeah, this looks cool. But now, having played it twice, it's one of my most anticipated games next year. Like, I really think there's some great stuff going on in here, and I think it's got a lot of momentum going into release.
That makes me very excited to hear. I agree with you. Pragmata is the one I'm most excited for of the three, and I didn't mention it like on socials at the very least, or I don't think on our pod when we talked about everything that we played at SGF because there was an embargo for the Capcom stuff. But Pragmata was definitely like in my top 3 favorite things I played at SGF, and I'm very excited about that game because initially when it was announced I was like, cool, a new Capcom IP. Like, I'm not trying to like say anything bad about Capcom. I just like,
yeah,
this doesn't do anything for me. And going into it, I'm like, okay, time to play Pragmata, I guess. Like, I wasn't, you know what I mean? I had like no real interest in it, but then I played it. I'm like, oh, this shit rocks. Like, this shit's great.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited to play it, and the boss fights sound fun. And add like that extra layer to the combat. That can't wait. Super excited about it. I don't really have any questions about it because I have played that game and I know that it is really, really good. Kevin, is there anything else that you want to talk about regarding Pragmata?
I don't think so. Again, like if you guys want to hear a little bit more in depth of like the regular gameplay, we talk about it a bit longer in our SGF coverage. But like the main kind of meat is what we've gone over here again. Boss fight was super cool. I think this is something that has the potential to be a real good surprise hit next year.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. Well, everybody, that has been your Capcom Gamescom preview of Onimusha Way of the Sword, Resident Evil Requiem, and Pragmata. Thank you one more time to Capcom for giving Kevin the opportunity to play these games and preview for both his channel and this one. Kevin, do you have anything left for the people before we dip out?
No, I think we're good.
All right, everybody. You can follow me on socials at CamFinalMix, and you can follow Kevin at Kevin Kenson. Until next time, we'll catch you later.
Later.